Okay, it is Friday, June 6th, 2025. I don't think we've met on the podcast in 3 weeks, possibly.
Could be.
It's been a while. And we've had a little catch up, but lovely to see you as always. I even missed class this week, and I only got half of the webinar as well, so I've been slacking. Um, I missed um, much of your talk about the full moon that's coming, and we talked about starting with that today.
Mhm.
So, unless there's anything you want to share before that, let her rip, lady.
Okay. Uh, I did a presentation on the full moon. We have a full moon coming up on June 11th, and it's a different full moon than usual. It's called a lunar still moon. And it's a still moon because it of the angle of the Earth and the moon and their tilt. It's a moon that is exactly at the middle of the of two eclipses. So we had an eclipse March 25th, and we have another eclipse on September 9th. And this one is right in between the two. And it is significant enough as a portal that structures like Stonehenge were constructed specifically to deal with the energies and the configuration of the energies on these lunar still moons, which occur once every 18.6 years. So, for a start, where were you 18.6 years ago? We're talking about 2007.
Uh,
Um,
okay.
so when I began talking about the full moon on Wednesday in my class, I had decided that I would do no research on it, that I would just look at the charts. In my experience of the way I read charts and the way I look at them, um, I do it as a social scientist, not as a regular astrologer. And I do it without going into it thinking I know anything. And actually, I come out of it not knowing much either. Um, when I was doing it in class on Wednesday, um, I got started and it was a download of the significance and the importance of what we're about to face.
Hmm.
Um, we are not living in regular times, and this full moon, which is aligned with the 27th path of intelligence in the Tree of Life. Um, in my class, I was talking and have been talking about the 29th path. So I'll talk a little bit. Um, I don't have oh, maybe I could put an image in. Um,
The 27th path is between the splenic and the solar, right? As far as
yeah, I'm thinking that maybe I can grab an illustration and just move it into my document so that I can illustrate what I'm talking about.
cool.
Um,
Can I ask you a question while you're looking that up?
sure.
Stonehenge, when you mentioned like, was it built to harness the energy? Was it meant to uh protect from the energy? Like what's the history on that?
I don't know. Um, but what I would guess is that, oh, this is a,
There's a bunch of things that I'm following lately, and it seems like there's all sorts of new crop circles and like it's just activity in that kind of realm.
Yes,
It's
there are.
increasing
And
every.
this moon speaks to all of that.
Hmm,
So, okay. Um, I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can. Yep.
Okay. These are the four worlds. And what I want you to know about the four worlds is by looking at these different matrices, the mental waking world, the spiritual archetypal world, the emotional angelic world, and the physical biological world. Those four worlds are worlds we live in. Now, I'll show you in the Tree of Life, the vector diagram I have of it, that the worlds relate in very specific ways. The Tree of Life um, is a graphic, very ancient, but dates back to Babylonian times and was brought to um, Israel by Moses. And when he taught about it, he left the vowels out of his teaching
Mhm.
because he wanted to water it down for the general public. And the vowels were in the mystical Judaism. So it is preserved. We now have them. We now know what it actually teaches. And when I was studying as a Jungian analyst, I was really fascinated that Jung believed that the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, was the model of self-actualization. And I believe that to be true, having studied the tree of life for more than 30 years at this point. Um, and studying the four world diagrams, I want you to pay attention to the mental waking world and the physical biological world are the only worlds that have the solar plexus.
Mhm.
This full moon is about balancing the solar plexus, which only exists in our waking mental physical world life, or unconsciously, and the spiritual world, which is about transforming through the creative intelligence of the emotional angelic world what we are emotional about and moving it to up the central column, essentially, to the crown and the ajna, where we have the capacity as humans to use creative intelligence and to be manifesting compassion and love. So, in the tree of life, and this is just a model of the tree. So, it does not have the images of solar plexus, sacral, solar plexus. What am I talking about? Solar plexus, sacral center, um, splenic center, root,
Mhm.
self. And then um, when we get to the upper centers, there is not a one-on-one to the body graph. But
Mhm.
in the lower centers, there are. Notice that we have here the cross. We also have the cross with a line between the horizontal line is if you're doing the cross and saying God's will, then the splendor or splenic center to the solar plexus would be God's way. God's way is compassion and love, the upper centers.
Mhm.
If in your process of self actualization or individuation or consciousness, waking up to who you really are. If you don't clear emotional reactivity and bring it to the highest centers by using your intuition, your inner alignment, your spiritual compassion, your intuition at a higher level of attainment, you do not ever pass through the uh, paths of return, which
Mhm.
go from the splenic center to the self center, the sacral center to the self center, and the solar plexus to the self center. Now, right in the middle, where this cross fulcrum is a when you're going across in the tree of life, the card that you're using is the Tower card. You're breaking down your old belief systems and bringing in new awareness. The card that goes from the sacral center to the self center is the Temperance card, the card with a four worlds balance, and where you recognize that spirituality, compassion, and love um, are ways that transform emotions and allow you to live in harmony with the deep self.
Mhm.
So that said, I ran Noble Energy Maps for the June 11th uh, full moon, and I was taken aback by it. Um, it is the chart of an emotional manifesting generator. I noticed immediately that the channel activating the sacral center is in the spiritual matrix. It's the 5342.
Mhm.
And the 53 in this chart is Mars in Cancer, and Chiron is the 42nd throughout all seven of the designs, well, six of the designs. We go from the 42, which is activating the sacral center, in Chiron, which is a healing planet. So we already know that this sacral energy that the Tree of Life says is the energy of the Holy Spirit is here to awaken us. And we look in the postnatal lunar chart. Notice that in the lunar chart, the spiritual chart that happened on June 3rd, this week, this chart is now active. It is the precursor spiritually to what will unfold. And we see that we have the 15-5. The 15-5 is the only channel in noble energy maps or in human design that is in all species. It is a transpersonal awareness channel. It is the timing and the embracing that we are one with all life.
Mhm.
And the Chiron in the 42 has lost its connection and grounding. So this is telling us where we are right now. Right now, in our mental waking life, we have lost our grounding.
Mhm.
In a week after the full moon, so on the 18th of June, people will start waking up to spirituality. I don't know why. I don't know how. Um, I would not be surprised if it is the time when disclosure happens.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think all of us need to ask ourselves, How open are you to recognizing that there is life on other planets and there are extraterrestrials living among us? So I think that could be one thing that happens. I also think, and I'm navigating here with
Cat.
Mr. to hold him. Um, so notice that in all charts except for the postnatal lunar chart, the one on the second frame to the right, you get the solar plexus activated to the sacral center. Now, June 11th is the full moon. The postnatal chart that I'm describing is a week after. So I don't know what's going to wake people up on June 11th or if it's what's already happening. But I can tell you that the channel 59.6 that gets activated on June 18th is a channel of emotional transformation. And in going back to the tree of life, when we look at the sacral center and we go to the root center, in the body map, there are 3 channels. Now, what the tree of life teaches is that the Holy Spirit lives in the sacral center.
You're on Zoom, right? Okay.
And that we incarnate into 4 worlds. And those 4 worlds are worlds we live in a body. But we are in a body, and then when we begin to move, so this foundation or sacral to root is called the administrative intelligence. It then moves up, and it is called the perpetual intelligence. And we are shown using tarot cards and with 3 channels in the body map. Why are there 3 channels only? The outside channel is the creative intelligence, the emotional angelic world. And it's called a channel of judgment, work on what has been spoiled. We are working on aligning ourselves spiritually to truth. And this full moon is about waking up to truth. Truth within the self, truth within our life, truth within the planet. The middle channel in Noble Energy Maps is in the spiritual world. It's the channel 3928. The outside one that's in the emotional angelic world is the 5818, work on what has been spoiled, judgment. The middle channel is the 3828, and it is a channel that gives us the sense in our body instinctively. Are we in the right place? Are we in danger of spiritually losing our identity? It's usually not conscious. It's spiritual. And in our culture, in Western culture, we have not honored spirit sufficiently, in my view. When I was in graduate school and my children were quite young, 2 and 3, And I knew that even as a developmental psychologist, knowing intellectually all about developmental stages and critical stages and were the kids doing the right thing at the right time developmentally, and there was no sense about how do you connect with your children's soul when they're going through the terrible twos and you're overloaded. And it's that channel of honoring the soul, not just of yourself, but of everyone around you. And in Western culture, we're so busy with the mental waking world. Now, notice there's the emotional angelic world. Now, that has a relationship to the mental waking world. The middle channel, which is spiritual, also has a connection to the mental waking world. And the third channel, the 5432, is a portal bridge. And why do I say that? Because it is in the physical biological world, with the 54 being a gate in the emotional angelic world. So when I read that with the information of the Tree of Life that says this path of intelligence is about remembering that we are incarnating beings and that we are here not for the physical body, but that the physical body is the vehicle through which we can manifest our spiritual presence. Which means that and I remember sitting at the Taj Mahal Hotel in Mumbai the night before I left India. And Marvin and I were spending the night at the hotel, and we were having dinner. And it was a balcony overlooking the lobby. And a woman came in with a newborn baby. And I started crying. And even now, when I picture what I saw in that baby's aura, was so painful for me.
Mm.
That baby felt so limited in consciousness. It was as though that baby's consciousness was squeezed into not being able to fully express itself. And clearly my heart went out to it. And it reaffirmed for me that for my children, certainly, and remembering back, which just came to mind for my nieces when I was in college, and I lived on the second floor, and my married sister lived on the first floor. So there were two apartments, and my nieces would come up while I was studying, and they would cry to me. And they were maybe, how old were they? 6 and 7, or 5 and 6. And I remember being their spiritual advocate. And they still talk about that I would fight their battle for them on a spiritual level. And in fact, at one point, when I was about 5, my oldest sister, two sisters, one who would have been about 16 and one who would have been about in her early 20s, decided to give me a haircut. And I absolutely hated it. And I swore that nobody would ever cut my hair without my permission. And so when my niece was about 9, um, my sister wanted her to cut her hair. So I gave her sanctuary in my apartment, um, and kept her there until my sister promised not to cut her hair. And she still talks about it to this day. So in this route to the splenic center through the 5432, it's telling us that one of the ways in which we need to master that channel, that energy of perpetual intelligence, is to set goals in our manifesting life that we physically align with, can achieve, and that are aligned to our spiritual higher self. The 54-4 is a gate that Ra always said was the most mystical gate in the body graph.
Hmm.
And the 54 is in both the body and in the emotional angelic world, the world that takes emotion and transforms it. So, one of the lessons of this route to the splenic center is about transformation. Now, notice in the body map for the eclipse, those channels are completely open,
Mm-hmm.
except where do you get, whoops, I meant to go the other way. By the way, those of you who are listening, I hope you like this video and subscribe
Mm-hmm.
and send it out to friends. This is an important full moon, and the more people we can get to understand its significance, the better the planet will be. So I want you to note that there are 3 channels from the root to the splenic center, 3 from the sacral to the root, and you have openness, openness, openness. Nothing in any of the emotional chart or the physical charts that are being activated. So, what we really have is that we are being asked to bring spirit to our waking life.
Mm-hmm.
Take and spend the next 2 weeks for certain, and then the next 3 months clearing emotional baggage. In the spiritual world, we are here to connect with all beings. And we're being told we're here to do it spiritually on this full moon. Notice that on the 18th of June, you get the spiritual connection back, and you get a channel activated again. It's always there, the 27, which is, where is it? It is Venus, and it is a very important line because it has to do with caring for those who come, those who are in our life, and those who we can protect in the society, in the world, in our life. And notice also that the in the spiritual design, we have the 17, we have the 8, that's 2. We have the 15, that's 3. We have the 53, that's 4. We have the 42, that's 5. We have the 27, that's 6. Do we get any others?
And when you're counting those, are you referring to
Yes,
gates in this
big,
spiritual world?
big, 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 big.
Right.
On June 18th, we get the 12. The 12 is in the spiritual design. The 12 is about communication. The 12 is the breath. Breathing meditations over the next 3 months. Very important. Now, notice that a week after the full moon, the 6:59 turns on. So the 6:59 in the Tree of Life is pointing from the solar plexus to the sacral center. It happens to be the channel of emotional reactivity and transformation. The channel, the 30th path of intelligence, just to complete the picture, is about collective intelligence. It's about bringing consciousness. And when we go on the other side, we are again bringing consciousness to the solar plexus. So the first path that you go up is the 29th path, which is the path of corporal intelligence, meaning you're in a body, you're going to be challenged. There are things in the mental, waking, physical world that are going to annoy you, irritate you, challenge you, and all with a mission. The mission to bring you into conscious awareness, where you no longer are challenged by the challenges of the mental waking world. They are there for you to learn from. They're there for you to master. So going back to the charts, you can see that we have the 6:59. We don't have a lot here from the root to the solar plexus. So let's look at the composites.
Actually, that was going to be my question too.
I'll make it bigger.
Can I ask a quick question?
And then I'll show you a little of the astrology, and you will get a huge message about all of this.
Okay.
So in the composite, now here's what we know so far. On the June 11th, this will be the chart. It will be the natal integrated vehicle approach to life. On June 11th, what this chart is going to be telling you is that you are a spiritual being in union with the consciousness of every other spiritual being in existence. It tells you that using your breath to monitor your stress level could be very important. It is going to be a time where you're going to pick up in your body what's going on in the planet. Now, I know, and all of my viewers here know, that as of today, which is June 6th, very interesting, it was Jung's birthday on June 6th.
Okay.
And it happened to be a day when the cat I had with Noble, Tippy, died. It was a very mystical experience for me and for my family and for many of my clients when that happened. And Tippy pulled some stuff that let us know that there is life after death. In any case,
Can I
when you
interrupt
look
there?
at this mental world integrated chart, you see the potential for emotional awareness. You see that the collective is seeking to work out emotional reactivity. Now, the 29th path of intelligence has three channels also. The solar plexus can get up to the throat. Those are not channels that will take you through the 27th path of intelligence, so you have the 29th that goes up from the root to the solar plexus. You have the 28th, the natural intelligence, that goes from the 6 to the 59. And then you have the intelligence, and the word is escaping me which one it is, goes from the solar plexus straight through the sacral center to the splenic center. It is within the sacral center that you must transform, or you can have a route that goes differently. So when we look at the postnatal chart, notice that the solar plexus, so this chart is June 18th. The bottom chart is, let's see what the date is, September 11th, 2 days after the next full moon. That relates to this full moon. So this eclipse, full moon, let's get to the chart and I'll show it to you. Sean, are you following all of this?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
You're muted.
Weird. Can
Sean,
you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me at all?
Now I can.
Weird. Yeah, because I was a couple times I wanted to ask you a question and it seemed like you couldn't hear me, so that was strange. Um, yeah, I'm definitely following along. Um, I have a whole bunch of questions. One of them we can save it for later, but I was watching the timer in Zoom, like it shows how long we've been chatting, and right at 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds, you started talking about Tippy the cat. So
Oh
I want to
my God, you just reminded me.
I want to hear those
One-
stories.
oh, wait a minute. 136, 154. Oh, thank you for reminding me. I
Okay,
was I was trying to record when I did this chart on Wednesday. I'm just going to share my personal experience.
sure.
Um, I hadn't done any research on it. When I've listened to astrologers talk about events or political things, there's always a bias. And so I wanted to look at the chart with no bias. And it just so happens that Pluto is now 3 degrees of Aquarius. My Venus is 0 degrees of Aquarius. My ascendant is 4 degrees of Aquarius. So Pluto is hitting my first house chart right on. Well, when I was talking in class on Wednesday, um, there was so much of a download because I could barely speak fast enough for what information I was seeing in the charts. And because they were so powerful, I really was out of my body and not at all, aware of the time. So I glanced at the time, and the first time I glanced at it, it was 1:36. So that adds to a 10.
Yeah, 1 + 3 + 6, yeah.
And then the second time I looked at the clock, it was 1:54. Also adds to a 10.
Right.
Both of those, at the time I didn't know, but I did know that at some point in the class, I said, I need to stop. There was so much energy sensation coming through me that it was akin to some of the energy experiences, Kundalini experiences I'd had. Um, and it was very clear to me that what I was speaking of, especially because I was then bringing in many more charts than I'm going to look at with you, because I began looking at charts of the students.
Hmm.
And this full moon um, is very profound. It is, the sun is in Gemini in the second house. The moon opposite it is in Sagittarius. Now, look at the center here. Pay attention to it. Notice how the sun and the moon, of course, are at opposition. Now, when in astrology, we can divide every 30 degrees into a 360 degree, and then take the degrees of each planet and break it down into 12 sections. So your 30 degrees is broken down, and then you get all the signs having 2.5 degrees. So when you do the dwads, and my program now does a version of dwads, and you look at the chart with the dwads, I looked at this and I went, oh my God. We have Pluto telling us that the undercurrent to what is going to affect all of us from the standpoint of how we feel about ourselves as humans, how we feel about our own resources, are going to be transformed. And it's not going to be completed for 4 months or so. To the eclipse. And the moon is right here in the fourth house, conjunct the Dwad ascendant, and the fourth house is the core of our being. So this full moon is going to shake us at the core of who we are. The third house, which is communication, it's how we see ourselves and how we talk to each other and our early conditioning and our communication skills. I see that as opening up. Now, I hope it is the opening up of the solar plexus communicating through the 27th path of intelligence to the splenic center, so that many of you who have been afraid of your psychic abilities, of your knowing more than you think you know, of aligning and having the courage to align to who you are and what you believe and what you can do in your life, all of that is coming into play. Now look at this is the Dwad chart put into its own wheel. What do you see?
I still struggle with how to describe what I'm seeing or intuit, but
It's a square. It's called the mystic square. You do not get this kind of, you have the North Node in a sextile, which is a nice aspect to the moon, to the Chiron Sun conjunction. Remember, it was in the 10th house in the natal wheel of the full moon, But when we look at the undercurrent of that energy that is impacting all of us on the unconscious level of who we are, it's about redefining relationships, not just personal relationships, but it's Chiron with our soul, with who we are. What is our contract with who we are? This is legal contracts.
Mhm.
I know when I came in, and my first memory is of seeing auras, I protected that at great expense from a personality level, but I would not let that go. And I knew that when I was a kid, I was going to get a PhD, so what I did and knew could be credible. And that was my motivation. But more importantly, I got this guy, Noble.
Mhm.
Noble Energy Maps, Noble Sciences, Noble Energy Wellness. I knew when when I first moved to Chicago for graduate school, we lived in a high rise. And the following year, I managed to get an apartment, a rent controlled apartment near the university in Hyde Park. And I wanted a cat. And my downstairs neighbor had a Siamese cat. And I didn't know anything about cats. I'd never had a cat. My mother did not like cats because she was allergic to them. So we lived on the third floor, walk up. And I would walk down to get the mail, and I'd leave my door a little bit ajar. And my downstairs neighbor, whose name was Mrs. Jacobs, left her door ajar, and her Siamese cat would come out into the hall. So I got to know a Siamese cat, and I wanted a Siamese cat. So October of what was it, 1966, 67, I found Noble. And my then husband said to me, if you can finish your paper and have the afternoon off, we'll go look for a cat. You better believe I got that paper done. And we found Noble and took him home. And I've told the story of him and me bonding, that he kept jumping on the bed, and I was terrified that he would scratch me and hurt me. And he went to the foot of the bed and just stood there. And I said, okay. And I lay down, and he jumped with paws on either side of my face and looked me right in the eye. And I said to him, I got it. And he came under the covers, and he slept with me every single night
Mhm.
under the covers. And at one point, he would get up and play at 5 in the morning. We put him out of the bedroom, and he started limping. The vet said there was nothing wrong. We let him back in the bedroom, the limp went away.
Mhm.
And he would attack people if they were not nice to me. So Noble gave me courage to live from my soul. And I just actually submitted a book to my publisher called Living from Soul, with all kinds of exercises to get in touch with how to do that. But this full moon, with the moon on the ascendant in Leo, we have two fixed signs, one in air and one in fire. And notice their positioning. You could say this is, oh, and the solar plexus. Every lower trigram in the solar plexus is Aquarius.
Hmm.
How spooky is that? But what I wanted you to see is this square. So we have the North Node in a nice relationship to the Sun in Chiron, and we have Mars in Gemini in a nice relationship to the midheaven in the third house. So the midheaven in the natal chart is Capricorn. And in Capricorn, we have 3 degrees of Aquarius. So this is an extremely, extremely powerful astrological chart. I didn't do all of the astrology for all of the noble energy maps, but suffice it to say, by looking at the configuration of it, there is no way that you can miss that this is about balancing the solar plexus and the splenic center. And you never are going to get personal stuff in this move toward consciousness. It is not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It is about truth.
Mm-hmm.
And truth may not be what you want to hear. I will stop sharing. Truth may not be what the planet wants to hear.
Mm.
From what I can tell, this is a portal. It is an expected portal. People have been talking about it. We are at a critical fulcrum, and this full moon is telling us we can go toward war or we can go toward peace. And there are many politicians on the planet who like war and who make a lot of money when there's war and when there's war development. In the past, and I do remember a time, it was 1982, and we were doing groups every 6 weeks for about 30 to 50 people. And Marvin and I both felt danger, real danger. And we considered putting our house up for sale. And we started looking at other houses. We didn't know what was going to happen, but it felt, and it just strikes me what did happen. It was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
82, yeah.
And we felt a cosmic danger. We didn't identify it with something emotional or political going on. We can look back retrospectively with a lot more consciousness about truth. And I would recommend that all of you listening or all of you who are watching the video think about where you were then, if you were born, and what was politically going on, and what was truth and what was manufactured. And back then, Marvin and I were considering putting our house up for sale. We didn't know where to go. It felt cosmic. And then all of a sudden, it shifted. And we felt it shift. And the danger was gone. And I read that right at the time we sensed the shift was when the extraterrestrials dismantled some nuclear reactions, nuclear reactors that were in danger. They have done that several times, dismantling nuclear reactors and preventing nuclear fallout. So we are at a point where it is possible, with the crop circles that have been appearing of the last few weeks, with the chart that I'm looking at, I believe we are going to have something of great significance happen from the standpoint of the evolution of consciousness. So I would hope that all of you listening dedicate the next 3 months of your life to transforming any remaining baggage you have on the emotional reactive scale to truth. And the truth may be brutal. It may hurt. Um, I wrote a chapter in a book called The Other Side of Divorce, where I went back and looked at my marriage and my divorce. And what I found in it was that my first husband and I loved each other. We were really a great team when we were in graduate school. But when we finished, our values had diverged. And it no longer was honoring our mutual independent souls to try to push each other in a direction that was wrong for the other person. One of us would have had a compromise. And I had the courage, because of Noble, to stay aligned with spirit. So, for those of you who don't know the tree of life, who don't know really what I'm talking about in terms of the 27th path, we live, all of us, in a culture. And the mental waking world has us behaving in certain ways. Now, one of the things I meant to say in class yesterday that I didn't say is that um, in my graduate studies, I was trained as a cultural anthropologist, as well as a psychologist, as well as, four worlds. In all societies, um, Aborigine societies, ancient societies, there was always rites of passage. Those rites of passage correlate with critical developmental markers in a person's development. Saturn returns, Chiron return, the phases of Saturn, 7, 14, 21. The Erik Erikson came up with stages that go from infancy through age 21, maybe 28. But we know that development continues to occur throughout the lifespan. So, from a understanding in Western culture, we do not have traditional ceremonial rites of passage. We have in the noble energy maps, the week after birth used to be baptism. It is in Judaism the bris, where you mark a time when the baby's about a week old. And where did that come from? It came from the belief that the soul was not anchored within the baby's body for the first week of life. Why? Because in ancient civilizations, babies died in the first week of life. They were, now we have NICUs that keep babies alive.
Oh,
I know the baby that was recently born that needed to be fed through a feeding tube in the first couple of days and needed care in order to survive. In ancient times, that baby would have died and there would not have been a seventh or eighth day. So the times delineated in noble energy maps, from my experiences as an astrologer, they calculate precisely to developmental times in physical development, psychological development, and cultural development. So at 3 months of age, a baby reaches for an object. Now, these markers continue throughout life, but we don't mark them. So at about age 7, a child begins to know right from wrong. So if we are training the solar plexus and the splenic center to be conscious, you do not engage with emotional reactivity in your children. You would transform that emotional reactivity in your children to compassion and love, first for themselves. Then, if they can transform it within themselves, they can spiritually think differently. That's developing creative intelligence. So, this full moon is challenging all of us brought up in a Western culture who did not go through rites of passage, who didn't learn. You know, think about a 13-year-old boy or girl. The boy, his voice changes, it's a marker. The girl has her period, or develops breasts. When a girl has her period in certain cultures, she was sent away from the tribe. And she had to spend days by herself growing spiritually. And the cycle with the moon was marked every month as a spiritual alignment. In Judaism, every month a woman would go through a cleansing ritual and then come back to union. So for men, the ritual was to go kill an animal or something. To prove masculinity. So we have within the framework of our genetic DNA the ability to go through challenges emotionally through, if we go back to the tree of life, it's from the root to the solar plexus, life challenges. You know, 2 weeks ago, from Wednesday until Monday, I had no internet service, no phone service that was reliable. It was so nice and quiet that I used it productively. Now, other people would have been yelling and screaming and pacing. I said, okay, God, what do you want me to learn from this experience? So we are challenged. And right now, the way I see it, looking at the chart, looking at the tree of life, looking at the astrology, looking at what people are saying, psychics, mediums, even the medical medium, people you would not expect, saying this is a really important, critical time. And some people are saying, if you make it through this time, you will ascend. Now, that's what the Tree of Life says. If you do not master the 27th path of intelligence, the path where emotional reactions get transformed into spirituality, compassion, and love, if you do not make it through that first cross of Christ, you do not enter the paths of return, which are more difficult. You then not only have to know truth from falsehood in the external world, but then you need to discern it internally. Where are you telling yourself lies about yourself? One lie is that you aren't capable of manifesting your fullest potential. So the human design community and what Ross said is very much like the dumbing down that was done by Moses.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's dumb the body graph down, take all of the worlds out of it, and dumb it down to a fourth grade level, and give people a formula that's going to tell them who they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And Ra was saying, it's the not self. So what was he really saying? He was saying, if you're a projector and labeling yourself, you're labeling yourself according to what you're not. Because you are in a 64 gate matrix. You would not be alive if every gate and every channel and every possible gate and channel were not also activated in you. You have everything you need to be whole.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is how. The noble energy map is a roadmap. It shows each world and where you can work and where you can be clear and where you have not something present that would be absent, but you have an exclamation point in that channel or gate. You just are sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not absent if you don't have it colored in. It's just not as strong. Um, Last words before we have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all esoteric literature says none of the forces impacting you, be they cosmic or personal, determine who you become. You have choice. Now, Ra told you you had no choice. That is bullshit, fucked up.
Yep, I agree.
Um, we were incarnated with choice. And the noble energy maps show you a roadmap of an easy way to manifest your choices. But it also shows you that you have everything you need to manifest in the world. Because at 3 months of age, when you exercised volition, choice, you had everything activated to reach your full potential. The chart coming up with this full moon is saying to you, do not believe the lies about yourself. Do not believe the lies about the world. Do not believe that ordinary people, regardless of where they live, hate each other or don't want the other person to live.
Mm.
There is no boundaries between our consciousness. And this full moon tells us to open to it. How we organize cultures, how we organize groups of people, we have lots of choice. Some of you listeners may not have a good relationship with your family of origin. Some of you may not have a good relationship with the church or with political affiliations or with schools or with a zillion other things. But it doesn't mean that you don't like each other as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So don't let the mental waking world contaminate creative intelligence. There is only one portal going from our physical body and existence to our mind and our ajna, our consciousness. Or let me say it differently, our awareness of consciousness. Big difference. So if you recognize that when you go to sleep, the consciousness of the planet is one. We're all one. It's one consciousness, one mind. We fragment out to differentiate. But you have the capacity to think in the creative intelligence of the spiritual world. That's your mission being here. And Ron knew it. He didn't know how to explain it to you. But it's a world in and of itself. When you merge your spirit with that world and have the courage to live it, I guarantee your life will change.
Mm-hmm.
And the planet will change. And we can only do it one person at a time. If you like this video and like what I'm saying and want to be part of doing this, subscribe and like.
I just flashed a little image up there because I can do that on the stream.
Okay, so now let's open it up.
Like I can ask you some questions?
Sure.
Awesome. I have a ton. And they're all over the place. So, but I'll start with the one that came to mind at the end. It's really interesting. Like when you get in a groove and you're speaking, you're, I presume, I don't know if you're channeling, but I watch your eyes. And it's almost like you're reading from something in the top right-hand corner. And I've been to your office, so I know there's nothing there. You know what I mean? But it's almost like you're reading like a transcript. I've
No,
never.
I'm not reading. I'm waiting and listening.
So you're hearing the dialogue and it's just coming.
It's not words.
Hmm,
I'm waiting to know what to say.
interesting. Yeah, because it's at times it's almost like you're looking at a teleprompter. And I know that we're live and it's completely in the
I
moment.
think I'm waiting for the story
Hmm,
because I'm looking up to where the connection for me happens in my crown and ajna.
hmm, interesting. I want to ask about Tippy, but I also
What
no,
do you
actually,
want?
I want to hear your stories about Tippy because you had said something to the effect of something with this cat, um, just confirmed for you connection to spirit, and then and then just thinking about your like how what you've been talking about um, the collective consciousness starting to come online spiritually. You didn't quite use those words, but that's what I kind of got from that.
Um,
And I'm having all kinds of experiences lately. And what I've found is I've become completely comfortable with talking about any experience I have with almost anyone I meet now. And
mhm.
I'm no longer even, I don't worry about how they're going to perceive me. Like it doesn't matter for some reason anymore. And what that seems to do with almost the bulk of the people I'm talking to is they're all of a sudden like, oh, we can talk about this. I had this experience, right? Like it was just like you could hear it, like it was like a gasp.
Yeah.
And I'm having that kind of conversation all the time now. Like
Good.
it's regular. And so it's fascinating. The other thought I had is much of what you talked about today in these themes have been playing out for me for a couple of weeks or months now.
Mhm.
So like it absolutely
Oh,
resonates.
starting March 25th.
Yeah. But a little part of me also feels like I've had a advantage or cutting edge by being talking to you this whole time because it's always been kind of the conversation, but I feel like I'm not even just being made aware of it by you today. It's that I'm in the thick of it and I'm blazing through it. Yeah, it's just been one thing after
Well,
another.
for many people, the truth will set them free.
Hmm.
And the truth is, we're spiritual beings. I mean, Osho said it beautifully. He said in one of his later lectures, and it was called The Goose is Out. And he said, the goose is out. You're all Buddhas pretending not to be.
Yeah, I remember it was that I listened to The Goose is Out, and basically the premise was this goose thought it was in a cage, but realized the cage door was always open or something to that effect,
There
right?
was a book I read to my kids when they were little, and there was a monkey in the cage, but the bars of the cage were wide enough that the monkey could have walked through.
Mm.
Um, okay,
What was that?
so where do you want me to go? I
Well,
have
so
about on the outside 15 minutes. Well,
okay,
I really have to stop by a quarter of three, my time.
okay. Well, I'll keep an eye on the time, and you as well. Let me pepper you with questions. So, what now that you mentioned the goose, there was something that came from design, but I'm assuming it came from the I-Ching, just had Ra's interpretation on it. And I can't remember what Gator channel it was, but the notion was you don't have to kick down the door when the key is in your pocket. And is that does that resonate with something you remember? Or is that's a raw thing? But whatever that is, that has uh I've found that I've been kicking down doors when like I had the key in my pocket, like all the time. And it's kind of like the goose thing, and I'm just trying to correlate that. I don't know if
Think about it in terms of the worlds.
Mhm.
Um, we are, Rod talked about the not self. There is no such thing as a not self. Um, if you're living and you're not honoring your spirit, you still have a self. You still have an identity. You're still living in a way that has accommodated what it is you were exposed to. So, what we want to bring in is spirit. We want to bring in permission to tell the truth. And the truth is, we're all capable of realizing our full potential by the time we're 3 months old. And we have choices, and we've made choices. I made a choice to continue seeing auras when nobody in my family, when I was a child, when I was an infant, knew I was seeing auras or could tell what I was responding to. So, for whatever my innate intelligence was, I didn't stop seeing them. I stopped communicating that I was seeing them.
Mhm.
And I stopped responding to the aura data because nobody would know what I was talking about.
Mhm.
Now, I gained a lot of confidence after my Kundalini experiences um, because I was a psychologist. And I would see in somebody's aura an age at which something happened. And I'd say to them, what happened to you when you were such and such age? And they would go white and they'd say, how did you know? So I began to know energetically when I was seeing truth and when I was not seeing truth.
Mhm.
And it has a different frequency.
Mhm.
Most of the time in day to day life, it's not about truth. There's no truth to the color you wear to another person. There might be a truth to it to you, but you should not be judged for it.
Mhm. I'm just gonna go with always what pops into my mind, but just how you said that. I I'm just gonna sound like I'm a bit splather, but um, someone the other day said they saw someone that looked just like me, and in my mind, I'm like, really, another dude with a purple mohawk? Like I jumped to what would stand out the most, right? And they're like, no, he's got normal hair, but he's got the same facial expression as you. And I was so stunned by that for some reason. Like to me, it just like the way my mind
So
works.
it's okay, but look at it from the world standpoint. You
Mhm,
looked as though somebody who looks at you, looks like you, must look like you in the mental waking world.
mhm,
But whoever it was saying to you, somebody looked like you energetically.
mhm.
And which would you rather it be?
Oh, the latter. But it was a mind fuck at the time. I was stunned.
Okay, but that's an example, Sean, of when you say, okay, God, what am I to learn from this? When you're taken aback, when something like my internet going down for what, 5 days, 6 days,
Too long.
too long, 7 days, almost a week.
Yeah.
Um, what's there to learn from it? I accomplished a whole lot.
Hmm. But you know what? You know what's interesting is it's like time is slowing down, and I'm certainly not emotionally. My emotional things are very short now, but I even in that moment where they didn't mean my mohawk, I realized that my face made this like kind of like because it just completely short-circuited. And then they responded to my face. Like it was almost like I could almost sense they were going like, you calling me a liar or something. Like it was, I realized like,
Emotional
oh,
reaction,
yeah.
emotional, because the truth wasn't being dealt with.
Mhm,
The truth was it was energetic, but none of you talked the energetic language.
mhm. Hmm. Yeah. The other thing that's going on for me a lot is I seem to trigger just about everyone just by trying, at this point, trying to be honest and be me. And I think part of it is that I'm not I really feel like a lot of the emotionality in me is gone, and it's actually bothersome to the other person. Either it's they're used to knowing how to trigger me and the tactic doesn't work, or because I'm not emotional, it's off-putting. In general, I have lots of uncomfortable conversations, but a few days later, the person is purring like a kitten around me.
Mhm.
In fact, a couple at pickleball where I just kind of they were in my face and I just said one thing, and it was like a car accident at the time. Like they just it was like they hit a wall, and they weren't talking to me and they stormed off. 3 days later, they were like cozying up to me and what it was this strange and partly I was like old me would have been like, oh fuck you, you just like completely flipped me off. You behave poorly as far as my
So you're
interpretation.
learning how to live in your spiritual world,
Yeah,
in your
it's
emotional, actually the emotional angelic world.
mhm,
Different world, but it still takes you out into the world.
mhm. Yeah.
I'm going to need to stop.
Yep.
I will tell you about Tippy next time. Just remind me.
Okay. I think those are the stories, and I think this is why consciousness is rising, is people are sharing stories on mediums like this, and there's not enough that people can do to block it, to just say, oh, that's a thing. That was a thing for me, and then the conversation opens. So yeah, let's make sure we do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm gonna hit the little